Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to the next video. So in this section, if you can remember from before, we took our sculpt and we took a few renders of the pages and then we exported them out of ZBrush, and now they are here into Photoshop. So what we're going to be covering is basically taking these pages and getting them ready to go into Maya, and then we're going to be doing the same with the foliage, and then we're going to start beginning to texture everything. But first, we're going to want to go ahead and make sure that everything is set up properly inside of Photoshop. So briefly, I just want to cover one of the first things that you want to do is you want to take a look at the normal map itself. Right now, when you see a normal map and everything, it looks like the exact projection of the object. That pretty much means that the format is going to be an OpenGL. Now, we want to make sure that we're using whatever format for the normal map for whatever the final output's going to be. And also, when we get inside of Substance Painter, you have the option to choose which format you want to use, but because the final output is going to be in Unreal Engine, I know that Unreal Engine works with DirectX, which that basically means if you see a normal map and it looks like it's inversed, that basically means it's DirectX. So when you take a render inside of ZBrush, you're basically always going to be getting an OpenGL formatted normal map. One of the ways that you can go ahead and switch between the two is, so right now this would be OpenGL, what you're seeing now. And to switch it, it's actually very simple. You just need to go over here to your channels, click on the green channel, and then just go ahead and hit Control-I on your keyboard, and that will inverse the actual green channel. It's similar to if you're familiar with being inside of Unreal Engine and there's options that you can flip the green channel. That's exactly what this is doing, just more of a manual approach. So you can kind of see what's going on here is if I switch it back, you see how this sort of top section is lit up? And then if I inverse it, now the bottom's lit up. So that's just one way of being able to tell what format you're in. So we're going to go ahead and leave this way now that that's working. So this actually can just go ahead and be our working normal map. So I'm going to go ahead and just save this again. And we're going to go ahead and just leave it at 24-bit for now. That's fine. So one thing you could do, you'll notice that over here we have our mask. So this actually can be really useful to us because since the pages are going to be an alpha map and we're going to have a little bit of an alpha when we are inside of Maya and in our 3D softwares, these pages and the plans will all be alpha. So one thing you could do is you could take this alpha here. If I just go ahead and make sure that I'm clicked in here, if I hit Control-A, that's going to select everything, and then Control-C to copy. Now I can come over here in my channels and I'm going to go ahead and add a new alpha channel. And then if I click on the screen here and then I hit Control-V, that's just going to go ahead and paste the mask inside of our alpha channel. So now we can actually use this as a mask to get our selections for like our diffuse and for our actual like alpha channel. So that's what we want to go ahead and do. So because we're going to be actually texturing our final diffuse and everything inside of Substance Painter, what we do inside of Photoshop regarding the diffuse, it doesn't really matter too much. This is mainly going to be a way for us to see, what we're doing inside of Maya, because the plan is to basically get these pages good to go and then, put them inside of Maya and start, placing them around. So we're going to basically just create like a first, like a temp diffuse, if you will. Okay, so one of the things that we can do is we can actually just go ahead and maybe we could fill this with, say, like a brown color to begin with, maybe something, down here. This will just be like our first starter, like paper color, essentially. Okay, so now that we have that with our alpha channel here, what we can do is we can go ahead and save this out. And let's just call this pages diffuse 01. And then very important, you want to make sure that you have 32-bit per pixel selected. This is going to essentially give us the ability to use that alpha channel that's packed inside of our diffuse map. So the next thing that we want to go ahead and do is we can go ahead and go inside of Maya real quick here. And let's go ahead and open up our hypershade. Okay, now once the hypershade is open, what we can go ahead and do is create another Lambert. And I'm just going to call this pages. Now we're going to go ahead and import the two maps that we just saved out of Photoshop. So first, let's select our color map. And we'll go to File, And we'll go to our textures where we have everything saved, and let's go ahead and open this Pages Diffuse. Okay, and then next, let's just go ahead. I like to just double click on these maps and then just click this sample icon up here, and that's just going to go ahead and make it so we can see the image of what we're doing. So I like to click that, and you can go ahead and click this little button right here, and it'll go ahead and just kind of frame everything. So the next thing you want to do is, if we go ahead and click on our pages again, let's go ahead and import our normal map. So if we just click on this bump normal mapping selection under map, click the checkerboard, we'll go to file, and let's go ahead and say use as bump. Let's go ahead and change that to use as tangent space normals. And we'll go ahead and just open that file up, select our pages normal. Now, the only caveat to this of using the OpenGL and DirectX, so Maya actually uses OpenGL, which is kind of, that's just kind of annoying a little bit because you kind of have to switch between. But I will go ahead and show you how you can switch between the two inside of Maya, so that way Maya's normal maps look like they're reading correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of scoot this window over for just a second. And let's go ahead and just create a plane. And I'm going to move this over here. And we could probably scale this up just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop that material onto the plane using middle mouse button. So now you can see, because Maya's already reading that we have transparency in the diffuse, and I'll go ahead and show you what that kind of looks like from the nodes if you're not familiar with that. So here is our diffuse map that we imported, and here's the texture coordinates with that diffuse map. Now you'll see that with the outputs, you have this main little node going from here to the transparency, and then you'll see that we have our output color going into the color. So basically what that's doing is it's already registering that we have a alpha map inside of our diffuse texture. So it's just plugging that right in there. So that's why we're getting that automatic transparency right through there. Okay, and as I mentioned before, what you can do to go ahead and get the normal map to show up correctly is you can select the plane. Let's go ahead and go over here to our, object display. And let's go ahead and go over to tangent space, and we're going to select left-handed. What that's basically going to do is just display the normal map in the correct way that we want to see it. So you can see that this plane is divided by multiple edge loops, which sometimes that works. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and just take all of these edge loops here for this first page, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete them. So what we're going to do is just select the face, and then we're just going to go ahead and hit extract. And that's going to split this little mesh off from the rest, so now we can actually start working with it. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is I'm going to go ahead and get rid of any excess verts that I didn't clear and just delete them. And now I'm just going to take my multi-cut tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of loosely cut out this page. Okay, so now that you have something that's kind of cut out a little bit, we can just go ahead and delete the excess that we have. And then we can go ahead and just add in some extra little loops here. And I'm going to try to get these to be kind of even, because I'm going to try to basically just curl this, the page up a little bit like it shows in the concept. So it's always good to just try to keep this kind of as even as you can. It's okay to go ahead and just, tie off some of these corners here like I'm doing, because it just needs to basically curl up just in a couple of ways. So okay, so that's actually looking pretty good. I kind of like that. So this is essentially what we're going to be doing with the rest of the pages, and also with the plants once we get them. So I'm going to go ahead and just take this and just kind of size it up just a little bit. So as you can recall, if I bring the concept over, it's basically this page right here that we're looking at. I'm just going to kind of size all of these up and get them to fit a little bit better. We're going to want to make sure that we scale this evenly. So you don't want to end up scaling it like this because that's going to warp the texture. Okay, so probably something a little bit like this. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of tilt it just a little bit. Give it some character here. And then what we can do is I'm going to use this bend feature right here. And basically just take this and make this curve up just a little bit. And you can mess with these settings, the high bound and low bound, to show kind of where you want it to start bending. So we don't want the top to bend. So I'm just going to put that down to 0. So looking at this from a profile, you can see that we have some cool bends happening there, which I kind of like that. So I'm going to keep kind of bending it up a little bit more. Maybe not too much. Okay, something like that looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and freeze that. And then I'm just going to take the pivot and just sort of begin to kind of tilt this up just a little bit more. Just kind of get it matching somewhat close to what the concept is showing. Something kind of like that. I think that looks kind of nice. If you want to, if you're starting to realize that some of these edges are starting to get a little bit too tessellated, what you can do is you can just add in a couple of extra edge loops. I'm going to use the insert with edge flow option and see if that can kind of help with the tangents. There we go, something like that looks pretty nice. And again, I'm not really too concerned with topology. I think that this is probably going to be just fine for our cases. And just kind of push this in just a little bit. Okay, so as you can see, that's basically how we're going to be doing a lot of this. It's really cool. It's a really good method to use instead of having to, kind of trace everything out and, create pages like that from scratch. I think this is a really, really good way to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to speed up the video. I'm going to do the exact same process that we just did and just kind of cut out the rest of these pages, give them a little bit of a bend, and just start kind of placing them based on where they are in the concept. So I will see you in just a bit. Okay, so that's as far as I want to take the pages. So let's go ahead and let's do the same thing to the foliage. So as you can see, these are the maps that I exported out of ZBrush, just like we did with the pages, using the exact same techniques. So once again, let's just go ahead and we'll go and inverse our green channel. And let's go ahead and take our BPR mask, Control A, Control C, and we're going to go ahead and create a new alpha channel. and we're going to paste that mask into our map here. Okay, so now that that is all done, what we can go ahead and do is let's create a new layer. This one's going to be slightly different, and the reason being is that there are multiple different colors going on here in the concept. So the main different colors that I want to add here, I want to add just green for all of the veg down here. I'm going to add some just like little purple highlights, so that way I know that this plant has that. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my mushrooms are a little bit orange there. So I think the easiest way to go ahead and do that is I'm going to go ahead and just fill the canvas here with a green color. It can be whatever green color because this is just temporary. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lower the opacity for just a little bit so I can see where I'm making my marks. Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead and just add a new layer here, and I'm just going to select more of this sort of reddish orange color up here for the mushrooms. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and just take a brush, make it a hard round brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint that orange color where I have the mushroom stem and the mushroom top. All right, let's go ahead and create another layer. And let's go ahead and make it sort of that violetly purple color. Something like this. And let's go ahead and we're just going to kind of paint that violet color up here. So now let's go ahead and we'll take the opacity back to 100. And then of course, everything looks good here. And let's go ahead and save this out as our Foliage Diffuse 01. And we're going to save that with our 32-bit channel. And then let's go ahead and just clear all of these different layers. And let's just go ahead and save out our normal map as well. And of course, we're going to call this Foliage Normal 01. And this we're going to switch back to 24-bit because we don't need to utilize the alpha. Okay, just as before, let's go back into Maya. And then we can go ahead and go back to our Hypershade. And let's create a new Lambert. And once again, let's go ahead and select the diffuse color. And let's get our normal map. Okay, so next, let's go ahead and we're going to grab a plane and do the same thing. I'm going to middle mouse drag this material onto our plane. And now you can see that our foliage has appeared just the way that we want. So that is great. Okay, so this one's going to be slightly a little bit longer because this foliage needs to kind of be, prepped in a way to where all of the leaves and everything are coming out of the right spot. So I'll go ahead and show you how I would do one of them. And then just as before, I'm just going to kind of speed it up because a lot of this is just really the same thing over and over again. So I think the easiest one, let's go ahead and start with this longer piece here. And let's just make this fairly easy on ourselves. And let's just go ahead and select all of these edges here. And we're just going to go ahead and delete them. And then we're going to manually just cut out this little leaf right here. Okay, so with this leaf, let's just go ahead and make sure that we give it a fairly good cut because this will make it a lot easier when we're trying to assemble. Okay, we'll just cut off the excess. And again, I will probably just go ahead and make this cut line up a little bit better. Yeah, something like this. Okay, so for this, actually, we can go ahead and just kind of even make this a little bit better too. And we'll go ahead and do the same here. We'll go ahead and try to get some even verts going on in here, even edge loops. And always, let's just add one in the middle, like so. So what we're going to be trying to replicate is we're going to replicate this guy right here. So I think the easiest thing to go ahead and start doing is I'm just going to actually delete the history on it. And then as before, I'm going to go ahead and take this bend modifier, and I'm going to go ahead and just sort of start to bend this into shape. I have learned that doing this manually is not really worth it, in my opinion. I think that just doing something like this and bending your leaves and foliage is just way easier. You can always go in after and adjust things by hand if you need to. So as you can see, I mean, we already start to have like a nice little curve on there. So I'm just going to go ahead and curve it maybe a little bit more. Maybe we can curve our low bound slightly more. Okay, yeah, I think something like this will probably work. So let's go ahead and just delete the history on that. Okay, and let's make sure that this is sitting at 90 degrees like this, and I think that should work for us. All right, so one trick you can do, and you can do this anywhere on the grid, it doesn't have to be in the exact 0, but if you go ahead and take your pivot and set it to where the base of this is, and if you just snap it basically anywhere on the grid here, what you can basically do then is just kind of duplicate this and spin it, and then you can kind of just lift it up just a little bit so that way it's not clipping. I think a little bit of clipping is fine, especially at the base. I'm not really too concerned about that. I think, you know, once you start clipping it a lot, like into the leaf, it starts to become really noticeable and looks kind of bad. So I'm just going to go ahead and look at the reference really quick here. Okay, so I think the trick is for these is to make sure that they're not exactly 100% even. I'm just going to go ahead and hit Shift D and just keep duplicating those around like that. And so one thing you can do is just kind of start to take a couple of these and you can like shrink them down a little bit. Maybe make a couple of them a little bit bigger just to start breaking the silhouette, making it feel a little bit more organic. And we can also break the spacing as well. Now, something I don't necessarily recommend, but you can do, you can definitely take one of your leaves and kind of stretch it just a little bit. I have a 20% rule, so if you can scale it up or down 20%, I think that you're still kind of within the bounds of it not being too weird. So I think something like this will work. And again, I'm just going to kind of go through and check, maybe lift up or push down some of these and start to bend them, just to make them feel a little bit organic. Okay, so I think this first layer is probably going to be fine. Again, if we are, if we come down to the rendering portion of it, and I'm sure this will happen, if you notice, any of the leaves that are clipping, too much, we'll just come back in here and we can just kind of readjust. Okay, so what we can do then is let's just go and take this leaf and let's duplicate it. And let's just kind of force it up here just a little bit more. And let's go ahead and just shrink it down. Just going to add in, just some different layers in here. Maybe we can lift it up a little bit more. Okay, and let's freeze the transform. And then we'll just duplicate this again. And we'll just kind of spin it. And again, that 20% rule, we can just kind of give it a little bit of stretching. And we'll just kind of dupe it and just do it again. So you can see how it's like we have a nice sort of base layer, and now we have the secondary layer. Just adds a lot of volume to it. I might be able to like raise this one up just a little bit maybe. Just something like this. Just kind of often changing the size. So I think this little gap actually looks a little bit weird to me. I'm gonna go ahead and just put this down just a bit more. Again, we can always come back and readjust. We definitely don't have to stick with this. We can always fix our mistakes later. just kind of looking at the concept, just kind of adding, just a little bit of variety. I think it's kind of funny, there's some spaces, there's like a bigger gap there in that one, so maybe this plant could just have some bigger gaps there. And maybe let's try to just add like one more layer and see. We'll make this a little bit smaller. And let's just kind of go ahead and kind of put this in the middle here. Make it even smaller. So again, this may not work. It's just something fun to try out and see if it works for us. Let's kind of push this back here. Okay, so let's just go ahead and we'll take this plant here. We'll make sure that we just kind of group it, and then I'm going to make sure that it's, in its own separate group, and we're just going to call this plant 01, and we'll just name them like this. I don't think we really have to do anything too much with the naming convention at this point. Okay, and so I'm just going to kind of leave this here for now, and I'm going to duplicate it and just kind of bring it up where I want it to be placed. Gonna stick it right inside this drawer here. And we might have to readjust because, we just kind of were building a plant out here, and you'll see that once we actually get it close here that it'll start to kind of clip through some of the wood. And if it does that, we're just gonna have to try and, avoid as much clipping as we can within reason. Because the plant is kind of sticking out here, so we could always just kind of take a leaf and just kind of bend it upwards and maybe flatten it out a bit and just kind of make it smaller just to kind of fit this just a little bit better. I'm just going to adjust some of the leaves again. Just kind of put this here, because obviously if you were to take a real plant and just kind of have it sticking out of a shelf, it would be kind of smushed up against some of the wood just a little bit. Like maybe this one could be tucked under. Something like that, even if it got smushed. And then something you can do as well, like we don't have to just take this plant and then leave it. We can always just duplicate this again, maybe scale it down pretty small. And then we can just kind of put this, something like down here. It'll start to really add a lot of like dimension and volume to this and make it look like it's not floating. Just kind of adjust these leaves again. And maybe what we'll do is we'll just kind of spin this around just a little bit. Obviously, like if it's clipping through this part of the wood, I mean, we could definitely fix that. Just kind of lift it up a little bit. Not a big deal. This whole part is really just about finessing and making it look pretty at this point. And we can do a lot of finessing as we go, but I think for now, I think this kind of works. I think, the more leaves you kind of have like hanging off the edge, it just kind of adds some drama to it. Makes it look, very, very dramatic, I guess. I'm just going to take this plant one more time and maybe just put it back here. And I'll make it a little bit smaller. I think if there's clipping, way back in here, I don't think that really matters too much. I don't think really anyone's going to notice it. I think it's the bigger sort of plants that if you see clipping up front here, that's where you want to try to avoid that. But yeah, I think that this should work pretty well. So I'm basically going to go ahead and just do the same thing to the rest of these and just sort of place them around here. I'll make sure to set all of the individual plants aside so that we can kind of see how much work that we've done. And then I'll come back, and if there's anything that I need to talk about or anything I forgot to mention, I'll go ahead and mention it then. So I will see you soon. Hey everybody, welcome back. So as you can see, we have completed all of the vegetation and we've kind of got everything laid out here a little bit. And you can see that what I did with this clump of grass here that I took, I think this is probably one of the notable things I could mention is that, there's just so many spaces here that are just kind of left open. If I go ahead and open up the concept. So you see all these little like open spaces in here, and there's kind of, it's kind of in there, it's kind of open. Same within here. Well, instead of trying to fill up the entire space with all of these plants, because it can be kind of difficult, just because you might run into some clipping issues. So just using some of the grass here and just sort of filling up this space a lot, I think is going to really help. And then later on, when we get to texturing, I plan on, just sort of texturing the base of this pretty dark in here. That'll help pull the illusion that it's, pretty dark and kind of goes back further. And you can see that for the purple little flower here, one of the things that I did immediately was I took the flower and then just basically rotated it. You can see here if I look down at it like this, you see how it just kind of like split 90 degrees each way. So that'll help the illusion to sell that it's a three-dimensional object. Otherwise, it'll just be flat. And I think when you're looking around it like this, it's just going to help to really sell that, especially when we get some really good lighting on there inside of Unreal Engine. Now the only area I'm like slightly worried about, I think we'll probably have to come back and change, is going to be this area. Just because when you look at it from right here, the plants are so flat that you kind of start to lose what's there. And so I think maybe some creative shuffling and rotating some of these around is going to help to sort of bring back the three-dimensionality. But there really wasn't much to it. I think for the most part, it's just about just trying to, rotate the leaves and the different plants around and make it, look and feel a little organic. And I have a feeling that I might end up coming back and maybe adjusting or, making different variations of the plants here and there. But overall, I am actually pretty happy with this. But I always know that with foliage, it's always good to come back after you've done your initial pass and maybe do another pass or two. So lastly, for the mushrooms, so this is kind of what I was mentioning before, where, it was just a good idea to go ahead and make the stem 3D and make it really low poly. So you can see here, I just have the, a three-sided cube, basically, or just a three-sided piece of mesh, and, went ahead and used that as a stem. And overall, I'm actually really happy. I think that this turned out super well because, from a distance, this is just a flat plane. The top of a cylinder just kind of pushed down. So I'm actually quite pleased with how that turned out. And, again, these are going to be so small and we'll probably only get this close. Maybe we'll do a couple of close-up shots, but overall, I think this is going to work out just fine. Now, one thing to note too, this is something that I haven't mentioned yet, but I'm kind of going fast and loose with how many tries I'm using for the plants because plants can get expensive. They don't have to be, but you can see now that just with all that I have here, let's go ahead and select all of it. We're sitting at about 47,000 tries. Now that's definitely getting up there. I mean, that's quite an expensive asset for sure. So, would this work in a production as a static mesh? Maybe. I don't know. It would totally depend on, the game and the engine and, the spec. But again, just a reminder, this is totally just a personal project and, just for the sake of doing a tutorial and trying to make something look as badass as possible. That's the goal. So before we actually get more into the texturing of the leaves and everything, in the next video, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that everything's named properly, and I'm going to get this set up and get ready to bake inside a Substance Painter, and we're going to do so in which we won't have to do an exploded mesh. We're going to do it all by naming convention. So that sort of concludes getting the pages and the foliage all sort of set up and taken from Photoshop, taking those maps and laying them out into Maya and adjusting them and getting them all set up ready to go. So I will see you in the next video.